Every so often, a video game comes along that doesn't just play by the rules, it rewrites them. Whether it's redefining an entire genre, pushing technical boundaries, or changing the way we think about games, these titles leaving a lasting mark on the industry and players alike. So, today we're looking at the games that didn't just shake things up. They smashed expectations, broke barriers, and became legends in the process. From groundbreaking mechanics to bold storytelling, I'm Professor Retro, and these are 20 games that shook up the industry. So let's get things started. The team at DMA Design, led by Leslie Benzie, Sam Hauser, and Dan Hauser, wanted to create a living, breathing world. They took inspiration from crime films like Goodfellas and Heat, building cinematic storytelling with a gritty urban playground. Liberty City was born, a fictional metropolis inspired by New York, teeming with life, danger, and opportunity. Now, at its core, Grand Theft Auto 3 was about freedom for players who could follow the main story, an epic tale of betrayal, revenge, and survival. Or they could ignore it completely and wreak havoc across the city like I do. Side missions, hidden packages, cheat codes added layers of depth that kept players hooked for hours. In the vast reaches of space, amidst interstellar conflict and the survival of civilizations, a single name resonates as a cornerstone of real-time strategy gaming: StarCraft. Released in 1998 by Blizzard Entertainment, this game not only redefined its genre, but also solidified its place in gaming history. At its core, StarCraft tells the tales of three distinct races: the Resistro-Terrans, the Enigmatic Protoss, and the relentless Zerg. Set in the the Copperwool sector, a distant part of the galaxy, the game weaves a narrative of survival, betrayal, and the eternal quest for power. What truly set StarCraft apart was its revolutionary approach to the game balance. Each race offered a complete, distinct playstyle, forcing players to master their strengths and exploit their opponent's weakness. Whether you favored the Terran's flexibility, the Protoss' raw power, or the Zerg's overwhelming numbers, the game demanded strategy, precision, and adaptability. StarCraft wasn't just a game, it became a cultural phenomenon. In South Korea, it blossomed into an esport juggernaut, with professional leagues, televised matches, and players like Boxer and Flash becoming household names. Not to mention, if you play the game long enough, you're bound to hear that so familiar. In 1998, a game was released that redefined stealth gaming, storytelling, and the very concept of what a video game could be. That game was Metal Gear Solid, created by the legendary Hideo Kojima. Metal Gear Solid blended cinematic flair and revolutionary gameplay mechanics to craft an experience that gamers still talk about today. Set on the fictional Moss Island, Metal Gear Solid follows the story of Solid Snake, a retired Special Forces operative reluctantly called back into action. His mission? To neutralize a group of terrorists known as Foxhound who threatened to launch a nuclear strike. Metal Gear Solid wasn't just about sneaking past guards and taking down enemies, however. It was about storytelling. Kojima brought a cinematic approach to gaming, complete with intricate cutscenes, moral, complex characters, and themes that questioned everything from nuclear proliferation to genetic engineering. And let's not forget the fourth wall breaking moments that made players question their own role in the game. And to finish off, who could forget the infamous Psycho Mantis boss fight? This telepathic adversary read your memory card, commented on your gaming habits, and forced you to switch controller ports to defeat him. It was a moment that shattered the barrier between player and game. In 1996, Capcom introduced gamers to a nightmare, a chilling survival horror experience that would revolutionize an entire genre. That game, Resident Evil, or Biohazard as it was known in Japan, set the standards for atmospheric tension, resource management, and the fear of what lurks around every corner. Now, the original Resident Evil, directed by Shinji Mikami, as I probably butchered that, was inspired by Capcom's earlier horror title, Sweet Home, and the atmosphere of George A. Romero's zombie films. It drew players into a claustrophobic halls of Spencer Mansion, where every bullet counted and every sound might signal your doom. Who can forget the first encounter with a zombie, or the chilling realization that the mansion was hiding something far more sinister than just undead creatures? The game's fixed camera angles and tank controls were divisive, but they also heightened the tension. Every turn of a corner was a gamble. Resident Evil wasn't just a game, it was a test of nerves. In 1998, Nintendo released a game that would not only redefine a franchise, but would also set a new standard for gaming as a whole. That game, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, was more than just a game. It was an experience that has since become a benchmark for what games could achieve. Now, the journey of Ocarina of Time began years before its release. Following the success of Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past on the SNES, expectations were sky high for Nintendo's leap into 3D gaming. Under the visionary of Miyamoto, the development team sought to translate the series' sense of adventure and exploration into a fully three-dimensional world, but this task was not small. At its heart, Ocarina of Time was its titular instrument, the ocarina. The magical tool wasn't just a gameplay mechanic, it was a storytelling device. Each song you learned was a key to unlocking new areas, solving puzzles, or connecting with the characters of Hyrule. The ocarina made players feel like they were truly part of the world. And lastly, who could forget the emotional weight of the music? From the haunting notes of the Song of Time to the joyful tune of Saria's song, the music of Ocarina of Time is forever etched into the memories of those who played it. The core gameplay loop revolves around exploring the world, battling other trainers, and of course, catching Pokemon. The battles were turn-based, with each Pokemon having a set of 4 moves, but here's the twist. Each Pokemon had its own type, with 15 different types like Fire, Water, Grass, Electric, and Psychic. The game became a fascinating dance of strategy. Now, the battle system may seem simple by today's standards, but at the time it was revolutionary. Red and Blue were the first to introduce a truly rock, paper, scissors-like dynamic to the world of RPGs. Water beats fire, fire beats grass, and grass beats water. This type-based combat encouraged players to think ahead and plan their teams carefully. And there was always a thrill of the catch. The Pokeball, the Great Ball, and the elusive Ultra Ball became your best friend, and catching Pokemon was one of the most rewarding parts of the game. It wasn't just about completing the Pokédex through. It was about finding rare Pokemon like the legendary birds or even the elusive Mew, but that's a story for another time. Mortal Kombat started in 1992 at Midway Games with 2 visionary creators, Ed Boon and John Tobias. Together, they envisioned a fighting game that would push the boundaries of what's possible in the genre. But they had one secret weapon: real actors. Using digitized images of martial artists, they brought characters like Liu Kang, Johnny Cage, and even the terrifying Scorpion to life in ways never seen before. But it wasn't just the graphics that set Mortal Kombat apart. The game introduced an entirely new combat system, one that focused on depth and precision, special moves, combos, and fatalities. Yes, those finishing moves that would become the hallmark of the series. But with great power comes great controversy. Mortal Kombat wasn't just another fighting game, it was violent, blood-soaked, and unapologetically brutal. Fatalities where characters could gruesomely finish off their opponents shocked parents and gamers alike. The result? Mortal Kombat became a lightning rod for debate about video game violence. The controversy was so intense that it led to Senate hearings in 1993, where the government started scrutinizing video game content. It was here that the ESRB, the rating system we know today, was born, largely as a response to Mortal Kombat and its graphic violence, but while critics raised alarms, fans flocked to arcades to experience the carnage for themselves. This is so great that at the time, depending on what console you had, you could either get a game that's all blood and gory fun, or a toned down one where the gore and blood was non-existent. Then came the characters. Few gaming franchises had a roster memorable as Mortal Kombat, whether it was a tragic rivalry between Scorpion and Sub-Zero, the thunderous Raiden, or the kick-ass nonsense Sonya Blade. Mortal Kombat had created some of the most iconic figures in gaming history. From the moment he sprinted onto the scene in 1991, Sonic the Hedgehog has become one of the most iconic characters in video game history, with his blazing speed, spiky hair, and attitude that defined an era. Sonic quickly became a symbol of Sega Genesis and an integral part of gaming culture. Sonic's story began in 1990 when Sega, in a desperate need for a mascot to rival Nintendo's beloved Mario, brought a talented team together. That team created a character with speed at its core, but why speed? Simple. Sega wanted to show off the processing power of the Sega Genesis, and give players a new kind of experience. Sonic the Hedgehog, released on June 23rd of 1991, was a revolutionary game that introduced players to the now iconic Green Hill Zone, a lush landscape filled with looped rings and enemies that seemed to defy gravity. For the first time, players could truly feel the rush of speed, thanks to a revolutionary level design that blended platforming and quick reflexes. Now, in the years that followed, Sonic's popularity only grew. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 brought Tails into the fold, Sonic CD introduced us to time travel, and Sonic and Knuckles allowed players to combine Sonic 3 for the first time, in an expansive, seamless experience. The story behind Myst starts with a small, independent game studio known as Cyan. Founded by brothers Rand and Robin Miller, Cyan had a vision to create a game that was unlike anything that had come before it. Cyan's breakthrough came when the Millers partnered with software company Borderbund and took a chance on something radically different, a world where you were not guided by traditional gameplay conventions like text, or even detailed plotlines, but rather by exploration and discovery. Unlike other games of the time, Myst had no enemies, no combat, no clear protagonist. It was a puzzle game, yes, but one that relied heavily on exploration and environmental storytelling. You played as an unnamed protagonist who found himself on a mysterious island with a single goal: to uncover the secrets hidden within. One of Myst's most defining features was his use of pre-rendered 3D graphics. These static yet beautifully detailed images created an atmosphere that was both inviting and unsettling. But it wasn't just the visuals. Myst introduced an entire new approach to interaction. Players could click on different objects in the environment, triggering animations or unlocking doors to new areas. The game's puzzles were often deeply tied to the world itself, creating an organic sense of discovery. Upon release, Myst became a cultural phenomenon. It was unlike anything the gaming world had ever seen. Its quiet pace, intricate puzzle, and deeply atmospheric world captured the imagination of millions. Myst wasn't just a hit. It was the top-selling PC game of the 90s. Now, to me, Myst is the game that revolutionized the point-and-click genre. I remember the first time I played the game. As in total awe, at the graphics of the game and the storytelling. I wanted to complete the game to see the ending. Myst paved the way for games like Siberia and other point-and-click masterpieces. Released in 1993 by id Software, Dune forever changed the landscape of first-person shooters. pioneering concepts that are still being used today. But how did that little pixelated game about killing demons and hell become such an enduring force in gaming? Let's take a look at the history, impact, and legacy of Doom. In the early 90s, gaming was dominated by 2D platformers and pixelated graphics. Now enter id Software, a small upstart studio with big ideas. John Carmack, the technical genius, and John Romero, the design mastermind, had already made waves in the early title Wolfenstein 3D, a game that gave players their first real taste of a 3D environment. But it was with Doom that they would fully realize their vision. Doom was built on the revolutionary id Tech 1 engine, which gave it unique pseudo 3D look and set it apart from anything players had seen before. Unlike the flat, maze-like design of Wolfenstein 3D, Doom's levels were expansive, with varied textures, realistic lighting, and a level of depth that immersed the player into the hellish landscape. Now, what made Doom revolutionary wasn't just the technology, though. It was the way it played. The fast-paced, frantic action made players feel like they were really there, navigating through dark corridors, fighting off gruesome, grotesque monsters, and searching for that next power-up. And don't forget the weapons, the shotgun, the chainsaw, and of course, the infamous BFG 9000. Now, in a time before the days of online gaming, Doom brought players together in LAN parties. For those of you who don't know what LAN is, it stands for Local Area Networks. With its deathmatch mode, you could frag your friends in a maze of levels, each offering its own strategic challenge. It was Doom's multiplayer that laid the foundation for modern online shooters. Now, unlike other games of the era, Doom was designed for fast, accessible fun, and that meant multiplayer was just as important as a single-player experience. It was one of the first games to really push the idea that gaming could be a social experience, even if you weren't in the same room. Released by Capcom in 1991, Street Fighter II was not just a game, it was the game that defined an entire generation of arcade fighters. It was the game that created the blueprint for nearly every fighting game that followed. But before we get to legacy, let's rewind and look at how Street Fighter II came to be. Now, to understand the impact of Street Fighter II, we need to first look at its predecessor, the original Street Fighter. Released in 1987, well, the first entry didn't have the same lasting power. It introduced the core concept of two characters battling it out in a one-on-one fight. It also gave birth to the iconic mechanics like the special moves that later became a hallmark of the series. Now let's fast forward to 1991, and Capcom decided to take what they learned about and build something bigger, bolder, and even more accessible. And that was Street Fighter II, a game that would set the standard for competitive arcade fighting games for years to come. It wasn't just about punch and kick anymore. This game was about strategy, skill, and character choice. One of the key elements that made Street Fighter II stand out was its diverse roster. Players could choose from 8 characters, each with their own fighting style and special moves. Whether you were a fan of Ryu's Hadouken or Chun-Li's lightning-fast kicks, Street Fighter II gave players the freedom to pick their favorite fighter and master their moves. Street Fighter II wasn't just a game, it was a cultural event. The arcades were flooded with players, each one battling for bragging rights, with each match becoming a test of skill and nerve. The game's deep mechanics combined with accessible controls made it perfect for both casual players and competitive veterans, and that was the key. It wasn't just the fighting styles that made Street Fighter II great. It was the mechanics, special moves, tight controls, counter picks, and just the right amount of randomness to keep things exciting. No two matches were the same, and let's not forget the competitive aspect. This wasn't just a game, mind you. You played for fun. This was a game you competed in. Tournaments started popping up everywhere, and since Street Fighter was one of the most talked about games in the world. For nearly 4 decades, Final Fantasy has stood as one of the most influential and beloved franchises in the world of video games. From its humble beginnings in 1987 to its sprawling modern entry, Final Fantasy has redefined what it means to experience an RPG. It all began in 1987 on the Nintendo Entertainment System developed by Square, now known as Square Enix. Final Fantasy was created as a last-ditch effort to save the company from near bankruptcy, with no exceptions of success. They named the game Final Fantasy, jesting it might be their last. Little did they know, this game would not only save their company, but it would launch one of the most successful franchises in video game history. The original Final Fantasy was a turn-based RPG that introduced many elements still used in the series today. A party of customizable characters, an expansive world, and an epic storytelling. Its success would lead to sequels, through which each game taking on a different direction, ensuring the Final Fantasy world will never be tied down to one single formula. From humble beginnings in the Soviet Union to becoming a global sensation, Tetris is a game that defined an entire genre, shaping the landscape of gaming as we know it today. It all began in 1984 when Alexei Petronov, a computer scientist at the Soviet Academy of Sciences, created Tetris as a simple puzzle game for the Electronica 60, a computer that was nothing like the gaming consoles we know today. Petronov, fascinated by puzzles, wanted to create a game based on the classic shape-matching puzzle known as Petronomes. However, his inspiration quickly expanded into something entirely unique. The game was simple but addicting. Blocks, or tetronomes, fell from the top of the screen, and the players must rotate and arrange them to complete horizontal lines. The more lines you clear, the faster the blocks fell, challenging your reflexes and strategy. While Petronov created a basic concept, it was the game's distribution that set the stage for the meteoric rise. In the late 1980s, Tetris found its way to the hands of the West, first on personal computers and then on one of the most iconic gaming systems of all time, the Game Boy. In 1989, Nintendo, struggling with the Game Boy's initial appeal, struck gold with the Tetris. Bundling the game with the handheld console, Nintendo turned Tetris into a worldwide phenomenon. Metroid, a series that helped define the genre, revolutionized the way we think about exploration and set a high bar for immersive storytelling in video games. But how did a game about an armored bounty hunter in a desolate alien world become one of the most beloved franchises in gaming history? In 1986, Nintendo released Metroid on the NES, developed by R&D1, the same team behind the classics like Zelda. Metroid was unlike anything players have seen before. In a world dominated by platformers and arcade-style games, Metroid introduced something fresh, a sprawling, atmospheric world of exploration combined with action and a sense of isolation. The game followed Samus Aran, a bounty hunter set onto the planet of Zebes to defeat the space pirates and stop them from using a parasitic Metroid creature as a biological weapon. What made Metroid stand out wasn't just the sci-fi premise, but the way it allowed players to discover the world on their own. There was no hand-holding, just a vast, interconnected world waiting to be explored. With its non-linear gameplay, Metroid encouraged players to venture into unknown areas, find power-ups, and backtrack to previously unreachable places. This was the birth of what we now call the genre of Metroidvania, a genre that blends exploration with the acquisition of new abilities, making every journey feel rewarding. The Legend of Zelda, a name that's synonymous with adventure, exploration, and epic quest. For decades, this franchise has captivated gamers with its intricate world, timeless music, and legendary hero Link. It all started in 1986. The first Legend of Zelda on the NES didn't just introduce us to the land of Hyrule, it revolutionized how we viewed exploration in video games. A vast open world with no handholding, just you, a sword, a shield, and an overwhelming sense of discovery. The game didn't just tell you where to go, it lets you find your own path, a bold design choice that set the foundation for everything that came after. To understand the legacy of Super Mario Bros., we need to take a step back to the time of 1981. That's when Mario first appeared in a little game called Donkey Kong as a plumber trying to rescue Pauline from the villainous ape created by Shinji Miyamoto. Mario's early adventures helped lay the groundwork for what would become an industry-changing franchise. But it wasn't until 1985 that Mario truly became the star of his own game. With the release of Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo Entertainment System. Designed by Miyamoto and his team at Nintendo, the game introduced us to a side-scrolling, action-packed platformer that would set a new standard for the genre. But what set Super Mario Bros. Apart from the competition was its fluid, tight gameplay. The controls were simple yet effective, with Mario running, jumping, and stomping his way through the Mushroom Kingdom. But it wasn't just the controls that made the game feel revolutionary. It was the way the game design worked in harmony with those controls. And with power-ups like the Super Mushroom, Fire Flower, and Starman, added variety of strategy, giving players a sense of progression and excitement. The well-crafted level design ensured that each new stage introduced fresh mechanics, challenges, and surprises. The game's ability to keep players engaged from start to finish is a testament to its incredible design. When Super Mario Bros. Was released, it was an instant success. The game sold over 40 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling video games of all time. But its success wasn't just about numbers. It defied what a blockbuster video game could be. It was no longer just about the arcade experience, it was about bringing rich, entertaining worlds into the home. And with the NES console, with Super Mario Bros. Packed in, helped revive the gaming industry after the crash of 1983. Mario's success created a cultural phenomenon, and the game's influence can be felt in countless titles to this day. Donkey Kong, a name that echoes through the halls of gaming history, a game that set the stage for countless classics and a legacy that's still felt today. But what makes Donkey Kong more than just a blast from the past? Let's take a look at how this legendary arcade game became the foundation for an empire, and how its impact resonates in the gaming world now. Released by Nintendo in 1981, Donkey Kong was a groundbreaking title that introduced us to two of the most iconic characters in gaming history, Mario, originally known as Jumpman, and the towering ape Donkey Kong. At the time, arcade games were mostly space shooters and maze-based adventures. But Donkey Kong changed everything for the first time. Players would jump, dodge, and climb their way through a series of increasingly complex stages, all the while trying to rescue a damsel in distress. Now yes, I agree, the premise may seem simple by today's standards, but Donkey Kong's gameplay mechanics were revolutionary. It introduced us to platforming, an entire genre that would dominate gaming for years to come. And yet, Donkey Kong's influence didn't end there. The game wasn't just about dodging barrels or jumping over obstacles, it was about timing, precision, and pushing the limits of what players could do with their fingers on a joystick. It was a true test of your reflexes. It also marked the first appearance of Mario, a character who would go on to become the face of Nintendo. In many ways, Donkey Kong laid the groundwork for Mario's success, giving him the platform to grow into a global superstar we know today. From his original arcade games, Donkey Kong expanded into an entire franchise, with Donkey Kong Jr. released in 1982, which put players in control of Donkey Kong's son as he tried to save his father from Mario. Then the series hit a whole new level with Donkey Kong Country in 1994, a game that brought cutting-edge graphics, tight platforming, and an unforgettable soundtrack to the Super Nintendo system. In 1980, an arcade game with no guns, no soldiers, no spaceships, just simple, hungry yellow circle would go on to revolutionize the gaming world. That game? Pac-Man. It's simple, right? A yellow disc, a maze, and 4 colorful ghosts. But under the surface, Pac-Man is a masterclass in design that has inspired generations of gamers, developers, and pop culture alike. The year was 1980. Namco, a Japanese game company, wanted to create something different from the traditional space shooters dominating arcades. Enter Toru Iwate, I probably butchered that name too. A Namco designer who envisioned a game that was more inclusive, focusing on non-violent, more universally appealed concepts. He was inspired by the simple act of eating. He just wanted to make a game that anyone from children to adults could enjoy, so he designed Pac-Man, a game where the goal is to eat all the dots in a maze while avoiding ghosts. The titular character inspired by a pizza missing a slice. Simple, but brilliant. Now let's break down what makes Pac-Man tick. It was easy to understand. Eat dots, avoid ghosts. But what makes it stand out is the strategic challenge. Pac-Man's maze is constantly shifting as the ghosts change patterns, and the game's difficulty ramps up as you progress. Each ghost in the game had its own behavior. Blinky, the red ghost, chases you. Pinky, the pink one, tries to get ahead of you. Inky, the cyan ghost, is more unpredictable. And Clyde, the orange ghost, is just a little random. This combination of strategy and reflexes created a game that was both challenging and thrilling. The moment Pac-Man hit arcades, it exploded into pop culture. In just a year, it was everywhere. Arcades, merchandise, and even its own animated TV show, Pac-Man wasn't just a game, it became a phenomenon. The game even spawned its own hit song, Pac-Man Fever, which became a chart-topping hit in 1982. The success was unprecedented. Pac-Man became one of the most true game icons, crossing over into mainstream entertainment in ways that would shape how games are viewed by the public for decades to come. Released in 1978 by Taito, it would go on to change the course of gaming history, becoming one of the most influential video games ever created. But what made this simple shooter was its repetitive gameplay and pixelated invaders still enduring? Let's find out. The premise of Space Invaders is simple. Take control of a lone ship at the bottom of the screen and shoot upwards at rows of descending aliens invaders. The goal? Destroy the invaders before they reach Earth. When Space Invaders launched, it wasn't just an arcade game, it was the first of its kind. Introduced the concept of shoot 'em up. With a wave-based progression, the aliens' movements, the slow descent built up a unique sense of tension. Players would find themselves on the edge of their seats, as each wave would feel more like a challenge. The pacing was deliberate. Each level offered a mild introduction to the mechanics, but as the game progressed, so did the challenge. The invaders' speed would increase, pushing players to react faster. Well, the relentless assault left little room for error, but it wasn't just the difficulty that kept players coming back, it was a sense of progression. Space Invaders was also groundbreaking in its use of technology. With its 8-bit graphics, the aliens started off as simple as blocky shapes. Yet, through clever use of limited hardware, the game's creators imbued those pixelated enemies with character. The marching of the aliens became one of the most recognizable patterns in video game history. Space Invaders laid the groundwork for an entire genre of games, shooters. Its wave-based mechanics became the standard, emulated by countless games that followed. The concept of using simple yet repetitive structure to create increasing tension challenges became a blueprint for many beloved franchises. In 1972, a single game would change the landscape of entertainment forever. It was simple, it was raw, it was revolutionary. That game was Pong. A simple ping-pong simulation with a black and white screen, Pong would lay the foundation for an entire industry and create a global cultural phenomenon. But what makes this humble game stand the test of time? Pong was the brainchild of Atari founder Nolan Bushnell and engineer Stephen Brustall. Inspired by the simplicity of ping pong, Bushnell wanted to create a game that was as accessible as possible to anyone. But the road to Pong wasn't easy. Pong's development was an experiment. Originally, it was designed as a prototype for a game called Computer Space, Atari's first major arcade release, but the game's complexity was too much for most players. Bushnell sought something more intuitive, and thus Pong was born. What made Pong special wasn't just its gameplay, but the way it brought people together. Unlike previous entertainment forms, which were passive, Pong introduced a level of interactivity. It was a game for everyone. You didn't need to be a hardcore gamer to understand how to play it. It was as simple as moving a paddle to hit a ball. Pong opened the floodgates for a wave of arcade games. It was one of the first successful commercial arcade machines. And its popularity gave birth to an entire arcade game industry. Soon after, companies began creating their own versions of Pong, but none would capture the spirit of the original quite the same. As video games evolved, Pong's influence remained undeniable. The simple paddle and ball mechanics inspired countless future games, from the early days of gaming to today's high-tech immersive experiences. But with even today's cutting-edge technology, Pong's charm still endures. It serves as a reminder of how far we've come and how something so simple can have such a lasting impact. In 2009, Pong celebrated its 37th anniversary, still regarded as one of the most iconic games in history. And there you have it, 20 retro games that didn't just entertain us, they pushed the boundaries of technology, storytelling, and gameplay. They paved the way for the industry we know and love today. Which of these classics was your favorite? Let me know down in the comments below. And with that, I'm Professor Retro reminding you to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button so you get future videos coming up soon. Till then, I'm Professor Retro telling you to stay frosty, keep your controllers plugged in, and remember, always blow on your cartridge.